When one studies life on Earth, one is struck by just how amazing the diversity of life on Earth is. And then also how well adapted organisms often are to what they do. Woodpeckers are very well suited to their lifestyles. This, turtle is very suited to its lifestyle, etc. And so then one could ask the question, why is this so? Why are there so many species? Where did these species come from? Why are they so good at what they do? Well, throughout history, there have been multiple answers to this question, even as far back as we can see. The earliest Greek philosophers were debating evolution versus design. So as far as we know, this was the first recorded philosophical debate. So um, some have thought that all of this life simply appeared, so that from nowhere, fish appeared from nothing, or antelopes appeared from nothing, or woodpeckers or horses, etc. And if so, if one were to ask, well, why are horses good at chewing grass, for example? Why are woodpeckers good at pecking wood? Why do mammals have certain features? The answer would be, well, they always have. They kind of suddenly appeared more or less in this completed state. There was a second idea, going back once again to the Greek philosophers, with the idea that perhaps life didn't always have these features. Perhaps there weren't always these specific species. Perhaps life has changed over time. Perhaps it has evolved. Um, and so this was a philosophical idea for quite some time. That's how kind of the Greeks approached this, through philosophy. However, for centuries, people held this idea, but it was Charles Darwin and George Wallace who then proposed a way of now studying this scientifically, that this would not be something that one would reason through, but rather something that you would scientifically demonstrate. Charles Darwin published the book The Origin of Species, and his goal was to set out a process and support for this process through which a species could arise through natural processes. So if you asked, why is there this species? The answer is not it appeared suddenly at the beginning of time on life with life on Earth, but rather this species arose, it changed from an ancestral population. If you were to ask, why is that species so good at doing what it does? Why does it have this trait? The idea could then be that that trait is a modification that changed over time from ancestral feature. So his book was titled The Origin of Species. Now I'm going to go through a number of steps so that species have a great number of offspring, etc. But however, I just wanted to point out that these statements in green are quotes from Darwin's book, The Origin of Species. So when I, in a few minutes, with videos of the backdrop, I'm talking about the struggle to survive and reproduce. I do want to just outline that these were, points made by Darwin, and feel free to read his original quotes to support this. All right. So if one were to then ask, how might this a new species arise through natural processes? How might adaptation arise? Darwin essentially came up with these basic steps. First, you just have to admit that just fertility is absolutely amazing. Organisms have this incredible ability to reproduce. And so if you were to look at how many eggs could be laid by a fish, very often, a female fish can lay hundreds of thousands of eggs. Cod can actually lay several million, that there is this enormous fertility. Some organisms, obviously more fertile than others. Once again, I apologize that Zoom and the internet sometimes slow each other down. We'll get to you in a second. Oh, come on. And so from a small number of insects, then females can lay hundreds of eggs, and so you can get incredible populations. So these are wingless insects known as springtails. From a small number of female fish, one can get an incredible number of offspring. Once again, a female fish could lay hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, even a million eggs at a time. Bacteria can reproduce so quickly so that if you took one bacterium that could reproduce every 10 minutes, within 24 hours, if you gave it enough food and took away its waste, the population could equal the weight of planet Earth. And so species have this enormous fertility. So if we're looking at the raw material for change over time, there is certainly that raw material. There is this enormous fertility in life. And Darwin pointed that out. And here's just one more example. When you look at all of these flies flying around, there's this enormous fertility. Okay. However, although there's a potentially unlimited number of individuals in populations, there isn't potentially an unlimited amount of, say, water in this area. So this area is very arid. So, you could produce as many offspring as you wanted, say, eggs of insects or whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean that all are going to survive. There's just maybe potentially not enough water for them. And if then we look at other environments, we see that there are, the bottom of forest floors where there is not enough sunlight. There is stagnant water where there is not enough oxygen. So notice that these fish are coming to the surface and taking oxygen from the air because there wasn't enough oxygen in that stagnant water. There may not be sufficient den sites. There may not be sufficient nutrients in the soil. There may not be enough sources of food. And so once again, there can be, very large populations, but populations depend on, certain requirements. So there may not be enough, food, water, nutrients, territory, den sites, etc. And so then you put these two together, and then one realizes that of that unlimited number of offspring, that not all are necessarily going to survive. All right, and so individuals die, and very often some die earlier than others. Some die before they themselves get to reproduce, and so one of then the factors you put this together, if you have all of these potential offspring, but not necessarily enough food for them all, water for them all, etc., the next generation will not have representation from all of them. Some will make it and some won't. Not all individuals live to reproduce. Now, if all organisms are identical, then the fact that some live and some die, that really wouldn't matter all that much. But the fact is that not all organisms are identical. There is an incredible amount of variation. So this should be stated, quite clearly, and we understand it far better than Charles Darwin did. Genetics was not well understood in his day. Variation is absolutely incredible. First off, there are constantly new mutations. Now, very often when we talk about mutation, it has a negative connotation. So clearly, if I were to develop a mutation, that could be bad. This could be a mutation which leads to cancer, for example. However, that being said, all of us are mutants. Mutations are so common that all of us have new genetic changes which did not exist in the body cells of our parents. We could vary with estimates, but estimates are well over 100 new changes in you when you were conceived. All right, so this is in addition to new mutations which have sprung up during your the course of your life. There are all kinds of ways that mutations can occur. Now, in my YouTube channel, I teach genetics. And so obviously I have videos that go through all of the different kinds of mutations. So sometimes it changes the order of nucleotides. Sometimes genes are duplicated. Sometimes areas are inserted or inverted. Sometimes, there can be segments which actually, move around from place to place. So there's all of these sources of mutation. Once again, going into all the different kinds of mutations is beyond the scope of our discussion. But let's just, perhaps this is a good example. What I'm about to say would be true of women as well, but to a lesser degree, just because while the number of gametes that a woman would make in her life is rather small. Men, and, this is typical of males in general, but let's speak in humans, men can make hundreds of millions of gametes per day. The rate of mutation is so high that any male could say, with statistical confidence, that he has changed every single spot in the human genome in at least one sperm, at least one sex cell that he makes today. So let me repeat that. So the human genome is the code for the human form. It mutates. In fact, their mutations are so common that men who make a couple 100 million, sex cells today can be statistically sure that on average, every single spot of the human genome is changed in at least one gamete that a male will make in just one single day, in any day. In addition to mutations, which give new genetic material, new orders of DNA nucleotides, there's another very important process which occurs during sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction then recombines these. So in addition to mutation, which gives new variants on the genetic information, two processes in sexual reproduction reshuffle these. So not only is there new information, but which genes and forms of the genes are together in any one sex cell is constantly reshuffled. So that's a second source of variation. So the two big sources of variation are one, mutation, and then the processes which occur in sexual reproduction. So for example, here, sperm are being made, and notice if this man has chromosome 1s, the big ones that he got from his father, there's a blue one from his father, a pink one from his mother, and then there were chromosome 7s, that blue one he got from his father, pink one he got from his mother. But when he started making sperm, the pink ones didn't all line up together on the same side. All right, so half lined up on, the pink chromosome 1 lined up on the right, the pink chromosome 7 lined up on the left. So that means that sperm are going to vary. So some will have, just by random chance, a blue chromosome 1 that he got from his father, a pink chromosome 7 that he got from his mother. But some will have both blue, some will have both pink, and all of these other different combinations. Plus the fact, look what happens here, that while they're next to each other, some of the pink genes are cut and pasted on the blue chromosome, some of the blue genes are cut and pasted on the pink chromosome. As a result, there is this reshuffling where different sperm vary in the genetic combinations they have, even when they come from the same man. Different ova have different combinations of genetic information, even when they come from the same woman. So there is variation from these two sources. Mutation is giving new genetic information. And then in sexual reproduction, there are events like the independent assortment of chromosomes and the crossing over, which then reshuffles which pieces are next to each other. Okay, so, and so obviously we could get into that more genetically, but that would be beyond us now. And so while the environment certainly does affect, some, traits, so if you're malnourished or not, that can affect your height, how much sunlight you're exposed to can affect, how tan your skin looks at this moment. So the environment does affect, but these variations to a large degree are genetic, and they can then be passed down from one um, generation to the next. So now putting this all together, and the final step, but obviously I'll go back and revisit some of this. If not all individuals survive, and if variation is inherited, then that means that not all forms of genes are equally represented in the next generation. So these fish vary, all right? The birds of today vary, the dogs of today vary. If only some of them survive to reproduce, then only some of those variations get passed down to the next generation. The next generation does not represent every individual of this one. It represents some variations in this generation more than others. That means the population will change. If you were to measure something, so let's just take humans. If you were to measure the frequency of blood type O, if you were to measure the frequency of black hair, if you were to measure, any variant, it will change over time, all right? Because the number of individuals who have, say, black hair versus red hair, or the number of individuals who have, say, blood type O versus blood type A, there's no guarantee that they are passing these genes down equally. And so populations change over time. So what Charles Darwin described was a natural sequence of events where here populations are changing over time simply because they vary, there are more offspring produced than there's necessarily food for them, etc. And then Charles Darwin then claimed that this could actually cause a new species to arise. All right, so and Darwin's day, as he quotes here, that people felt that every species that existed went back to the beginning of life on Earth, and that species don't change, that it would be impossible to get a new species, right? Because just species were invariant in that sense. All right, and Darwin did a lot of studies with pigeons. That's why I have this kind of in the background. It was the idea that the pigeon here goes back to the beginning of time, whereas Darwin said, no, this has descended from wild doves, so that there was an ancestral species that changed over time because there were certain traits which were passed down, to a greater frequency, that a new species arose. His book was titled The Origin of Species. And so while this discussion on evolution, which is one of the most fundamental ideas in biology, could then go into lots of different directions. So we can obviously, we could discuss then not only the origin of species, but then the origin over more time of different genera, and then the origin of all life on Earth, talking about fossil evidence, anatomical evidence, genetic evidence, etc. This is such a big concept; it should be broken into steps. So this first piece was simply, these were Darwin's steps, where he said, through this process of natural events, change then occurs over time. And this change can then result in not only new variations, changing the frequency of variations in a population, but then even the origin of a new species, so that the species we see today don't necessarily have to have appeared in this form in the beginning of life on Earth, but could then rather have changed over time.